part of my journey to doing this was 10 years of thinking, what would an airplane be like if Apple had designed it? It's the first airliner that's not the same size front to back. It's actually bigger in the front and smaller in the back. And that's a principle called area ruling. It makes supersonic flight way more efficient if you tailor the fuselage. What we wanted to do is create a great first impression and a great experience at every seat. Today's commercial airplanes, airliners, fly between 75 and 85% of the speed of sound. Our airplane can do 1.7 times. This is the first time it's done outside of a government or military. And it's the first time that anybody's reliably demonstrated the ability to fly supersonic without an audible boom. I'm standing in the hangar, it looks like the clouds are starting to clear, and then the team comes out of the debrief. They start getting the airplane ready to tow out of the hangar. And at the moment I saw that happening, I teared up because I knew it was going to happen.
Welcome to Grit. I'm Jubin, partner at Kleiner Perkins. Grit is a show where we explore the intersection of the personal and professional challenges that come with company building. Today we have Blake Scholl, founder and CEO of Boom Supersonic, the guy bringing back supersonic flight for the first time in over 2 decades. Enjoy the episode.
Literally 2 weeks ago, we broke the sound barrier the second time, announced Boomless supersonic flight, and I got on an overnight flight to DC because I was going to go lobby to get the supersonic ban reversed. And I didn't even know until after I'd landed that I had an invitation to go to the White House. So
Did you go?
Yeah.
That's pretty epic. I mean, from obscurity to pretty mainstream.
It was, it's a little surreal, to be honest.
You're like a celebrity right now, right?
I don't know. It's, that's not my self-image, but I do have these experiences now where I'm on kind of an airplane, I'm about to get off, and as we're deboarding, the guy next to me says, "Are you Blake Scholl?" And I'm like, "Are you creeping on my laptop?"
What does breaking the sound barrier even mean?
Means going faster than the speed of sound, and it's there isn't really a sound barrier.
Right.
Like Chuck Yeager kind of proved that in 1947.
Okay.
Before that, people thought there was a sound barrier because there was a lot of aerodynamics that weren't yet understood.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that happens when you go faster is the center of lift changes on the wings. So you can kind of think of as an airplane, it's like a seesaw in a way. And there's lift pushing up, and there's the weight of the airplane pushing down. And obviously the airplane has to be balanced. And the point that lift pushes on changes as you accelerate, it moves backwards.
Uh-huh.
And so of course if you move the fulcrum in a seesaw, it's going to go like that.
Uh-huh.
And so before this is understood, that's what would happen on airplanes. And so if you move the center of lift backwards, it's going to pitch the nose downward.
Yeah.
Which is going to make the airplane dive. We're just going to make it go faster. We're just going to move the center of lift further backwards, right? And so it result in, people called it Mach tuck.
Yeah.
And it would be when the airplanes weren't designed for this, it was unrecoverable. Basically, you went too fast, you'd end up in a dive, and you couldn't pull out of the dive. And so people, a lot of pilots, didn't make it through that. But this is 1940s learnings in aerodynamics. And now we know how to design airplanes that can remain balanced,
going really fast.
And basically, by the way, the way you do it is you also move the center of gravity, so the airplane pumps fuel back and forwards as the speed changes.
Wow, why was it such a big deal that you broke Mach speed?
Well, it's never been done before outside of a government or military.
And when was the last time it was done even by them?
Fighter jets do it routinely, all the time. Having hung out in the Mojave Desert with the XB-1 team, sonic booms are a regular occurrence.
What is a sonic boom?
Sonic boom is the sound an airplane can make when it breaks the sound barrier. Mm-hmm. And, people think of them because they're not common in most places now. There's all this mythology around sonic boom and oh my gosh, it's terrible, it'll break windows. And by the way, you can break a window with a sonic boom by flying a relatively big airplane very low. Supersonic 50 feet over the ground, you can break a window.
Yeah.
But by the way, if you fly an airliner supersonic 50 feet over the ground,
you're breaking a window.
Well, the broken window was not the problem that day. You shouldn't be going that fast, that low on an airliner.
Right.
But up high, there's an inverse square law. It's sort of like the wake of a boat. Like a big boat makes a bigger wake. A more distant boat, by the time the wake gets to you, it's smaller. And so sonic boom, you can kind of think of as like wake of a boat. And so if the boat's big and far away, the wake is much smaller. And this is where the metaphor breaks down. If you fly the airplane the right way, there's actually the wake actually turns around and never gets to you.
Interesting. And so it hasn't been done. It gets done routinely by the military.
Right. But yes, to go back to the first here, this is the first time it's done outside of a government or military. Like literally I asked ChatGPT a few weeks ago, which countries have built supersonic jets? And it's like, here are the 7 that have, but there's one other one that's not a country. It's called Boom. And it's like, yay, ChatGPT. But so it's the first time outside of a government or military. It's the first civil supersonic jet since Concorde, which first flew in 1969. It's the first civil supersonic jet made in America. And it's the first time that anybody's reliably demonstrated the ability to fly supersonic without an audible boom. So we got a good deal of firsts in there.
And in 69, when the Concorde first flew, who did that?
It was a joint venture between the French and British governments. So Concorde, just like the Apollo program, was a Cold War era glory project. So this is very much about national prestige politics, and it was about showing that Western technology could beat Soviet technology to win over the third world. And it was done with zero thought to economics. And in 1969, people thought moon landing, supersonic flight, like we're like about to step into this amazing future.
Right.
And now half a century later, you can't land on the moon and you can't fly supersonic. And my view is, this is controversial, but my view is Concorde killed supersonic flight and Apollo killed space exploration. And we had 50 years of regression in both. And, thank you to all the space entrepreneurs that are fixing that in the space side. And we got to do it in the airplane side too.
Can you walk your logic backwards on both of those those examples?
So Apollo was famously done with like a material percentage of GDP. It was done in an extremely expensive way and very obviously with no commercial model. And so we go put a flag on the moon. Like, woohoo, we got here first.
Right.
What's next? We don't know.
Right.
Like we did it. We did a stunt, and we did it with no sustainable economics. And
it was just crazy expensive.
It was crazy expensive, and there was zero thought to like there's any kind of commercial thing here at all. Now, and Concorde at least had the trappings of being commercial. It was like, oh, it's an airliner. We'll sell it to airlines. They'll sell tickets. Like, it kind of looked commercial.
Like the French and British governments built a plane.
Yeah.
That was flying passengers around.
It was. Yeah, it was technically a success.
In 69.
69 was the first test flight. They carried passengers for the first time in 76.
Okay.
But it was one way to look at it
and was that going at the speed of sound?
It was going twice the speed of sound.
Which is how much faster than what we know today in commercial airlines?
Like a little bit, like 2.5 times.
2.5 times faster.
Yeah. So today's commercial airplanes, airliners fly between 75 and 85% of the speed of sound. And our airplane can do 1.7 times, and Concorde was 2.02 actually.
So it takes me 6 hours to get from San Francisco to Hawaii. Cut it in half. Tokyo, 10 hours. Cut it in half.
Roughly, yeah.
Sorry, and continue. So in 69...
Yeah, so in 69 they did the first test flight. In 76 they started carrying passengers. And the thing that... we have the perfect term now in the Valley for this. It's called product market fit. and Concorde had no product market fit.
Yeah.
And so amazing technology. Like it really is... Like I feel like it's like half unfair to dunk on Concorde because they built a supersonic passenger airliner in the 1960s with drafting paper and slide rules and aluminum and converted military engines. Technologically very impressive. Just the same way like Apollo, technologically very impressive.
Yeah.
But okay, let's look at it as a product. Let's put our product manager hat on. Here's a 100-seat airplane. It's very cramped. The seats look like they came out of the back of like a Southwest jet. And yet there were 100 of them, and adjusted for inflation, the fares were like $20,000. And so the result, here's an airplane that's for royalty and rock stars, And it even on the most popular, like best routes on the planet, I mean, the like New York London is like the best route on the planet you could ever have for a supersonic jet.
Because it's all water.
Oh, it's all water, and it's like the most premium passengers fly that route, you know. So it's like literally like royalties and rock stars fly that route all the time. So if you want to get people to pay more for speed, like that's the best possible route. And yet, averaged across 30 years of flying, it flew half empty. And so just and it didn't scale to other routes economically. And so it was economically stillborn, and it sort of led to all these industry conclusions. Like, when I started looking at this a bit more than a decade ago, you go on the internet and you're like, why don't airplanes fly faster? You can find a zillion YouTube videos, and they would say things like, well, passengers, only care about cost. They don't care about speed. And so the cheapest ticket wins, and supersonic flight will cost more. And, unless you can solve the sonic boom, the market's not big enough. And Concorde was too small. And it was a bunch of kind of qualitative claims about quantitative questions that the world had sort of, like, in my view, drawn completely the wrong conclusions from Concorde.
And you think that basically threw cold water on the entire market for 30 years.
So two things happened that were disasters. Disaster number one, and I'll call this the minor disaster. The minor disaster was the public and industry, kind of drew the wrong conclusions about the viability of supersonic flight. But that would have been like relatively easily overcome. The worst thing was the fact that supersonic flight was a competition between nations brought in national politics into it. And since the American competitor to Concorde was canceled before it was ever built, and then after that, we banned supersonic flight over land in the U.S.
because of the noise.
Well, that was the cover story. In my view, is every bad regulation has a moral cover story, and then there's a real story that no one wants to say. And if the real issue is noise, it would have been a noise limit, not a speed limit. And so I think the actual purpose of that regulation was to protect 1960s Boeing from Europe. And so we banned supersonic flight over land, and what we inadvertently did in that is we banned the minimum viable supersonic jet. The actual minimum viable supersonic jet is not a supersonic airliner. It's a supersonic private jet that's relatively small. It's for the people whose time is most valuable, and all it really needs to do is fly coast to coast. It needs to be able to get from San Francisco to New York as quickly as possible, and at the cost almost doesn't matter. But if you can't fly supersonic over land, there's no market for that product. And so the thing that we're doing at Boom that is, I just call it like our leap is, until that regulation changes, the MVP is still banned.
Meaning you're just building a product that can fly over water.
We're building 2.0 as our very first thing, which is another reason why we had to do a test airplane, learn how to do this.
Yeah. But even if you had it today, you can't fly SF to New York.
We can fly it, but we can fly it subsonic. And so, which is like, point? Yeah, it'd be like 20% faster, so maybe it's like half
20% faster than existing commercial airlines.
That's right. Because we can fly closer to the speed of sound. We can fly 95% of the speed of sound instead of 75% of the speed of sound. Okay, that's better. But it's like, is it game-changingly better? I don't know. I'm not sure it really is. I think you have to go more than 20% faster to really have it be kind
justify the cost.
To make the whole thing worthwhile.
Yep. And today, the regulation says that you cannot fly over land today.
Still.
By the way, didn't Elon, didn't you say, hey, my least favorite regulation on Twitter is this? Yeah. And it was the sound barrier thing?
That's right.
And then Elon
said this administration will fix it. And
dude, you are in a wild world right now.
It is a wild world. And so, I think, FAR, Federal Aviation Regulation 91-817, its days are numbered.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
And so right now, why?
By the way, sorry, I want to say one more thing about that. This is not controversial. Like politics today are full of 1,000 things that are controversial. But I don't know anybody who thinks there should be a speed limit instead of a noise limit. That rule says thou shalt not go supersonic. What it should say is thou shalt not make bad noises.
No, it's like what SpaceX had to deal with like doing, what was it, like noise testing on otters or something in the ocean for like there's these crazy rules.
I think so. But by the way, you could at least argue about that because there was a noise. There was a sonic boom, and you can argue some sonic booms are bad, some sonic booms are not bad. Reasonable people might differ about where a line should be drawn, but I'm pretty sure that if there's no boom, that's on the happy side of the line.
You're saying you have innovated in a way that there is no audible noise.
There is no audible boom.
What? How?
So it's really simple physics that have been known for a long time. So the summary is that the boom comes off the airplane, it makes a U-turn in the atmosphere, and it goes up before it ever hits the ground. And so you don't hear it. And okay, so how does that work? We've probably all seen the science experiment in like middle school or high school where you get a glass of water and you drop a pencil in it, and the pencil looks broken, right? Mm-hmm. And why does the pencil look broken? Well, light refracts. And why does light refract? When it goes through materials, the materials have different speeds of light. And so the light will bend or refract when it goes through a transition of different, or places where the speed's different. And the best way to think of it is imagine you're driving your car and like the wheels on the right are going faster than the wheels on the left. Well, you're going to curve to the left. The car is going to turn towards where the speed is lower. And a wave does the same thing. And so light does it and sound does it too. And the speed of sound is not the same everywhere. The speed of sound is a function of temperature. The colder it is, the lower the speed of sound. The warmer, the higher. And so the atmosphere is kind of warmest at ground level. And the first 36,000 feet of the atmosphere, it's cooler as we go up. And so what that means is lower speed of sound higher, higher speed of sound lower. So that the boom, when it comes off the airplane, it curves towards a lower speed of sound. It curves upward. And so the art of doing boomless cruise is to first off fly high enough that the boom can make a U-turn and the bottom of the U never touches the ground. And second, to control the angle at which the boom comes off the airplane so that the geometry works. Like if it comes off at a very steep angle, it's going to hit the ground. There's not enough. You can't U-turn. The U is too steep. It's more like a V. And what you want is kind of a shallow U that's minimum of height. So you got to control the angle of the boom, which is about speed, and you got to control the height of the airplane relative to the height of the U, which is about just flying high. And so to make boomless supersonic flight practical, you need a couple things. You need close to real-time weather data and a computer. So you know what the actual temperature gradient is, the actual speed of sound gradient. Winds matter for this too. Is the wind blowing the boom one way or the other? You got to know. So you need weather data, a computer, and then you need engines and aerodynamics that can efficiently break the sound barrier at a high enough altitude that you can get this U-turn.
Did that technology exist in '69?
No, is a short answer. Now, did Concorde do this sometimes? Yes.
But not reliably.
But not reliably and not practically. So the right around the speed of sound, right around Mach 1, it's called transonic, and it's kind of the worst speed to fly an airplane at. It's higher drag, it's worse fuel efficiency, and Concorde didn't have the engine power to fly at I'll call it these like transonic kind of light supersonic speeds without the afterburners on, and the afterburners quadrupled. Or sorry, no, correction. They doubled the fuel consumption, and so the result.
And that's why the ticket prices were so high for the seats.
Well, yeah, but they didn't use afterburners except for takeoff and for transonic. When they're up at Mach 2, the afterburners were off; they weren't needed anymore. They were needed to overcome the kind of the higher drag flight regimes. But they couldn't fly in a boomless condition. So if they couldn't predict what speed and altitude they needed on a given day. 2, they couldn't sit in that condition without the afterburners, which means like the range of the airplane would drop, and like it didn't have enough range to go coast to coast in a boomless condition. So like, what's the point?
Right.
Yeah. So the engine efficiency wasn't good enough.
That makes
the computers weren't there. The weather data wasn't there.
Yeah. And where did you fly this test flight a few weeks ago?
In the Mojave Desert in Southern California.
You did 2 of them?
Yeah, we did 2 test flights, and we broke the sound barrier a total of 6 times.
Why not 1?
Why not 1?
Why not just 1 test?
Like we wanted to show that we could do it and do it and do it and do it.
And there's a pilot in there.
There is, yeah.
Correct? Mm-hmm. Were you quite convinced that the plane was definitely going to make it?
Yes. So in some ways,
like this wasn't one of those SpaceX rocket things where the first couple could have blown up.
So it's a great question. Some people are saying that this is like Supersonic Flight's Falcon 1 moment, and the Falcon 1, of course, that was the first SpaceX rocket that successfully put something in orbit, and in many ways, there's a lot of analogy there. Like that was the first time that had been done outside of a government or military. But what's different is the first 3 Falcon 1s blew up. And it was okay because nobody was on board. But XB1 by design has a human pilot, and failure is not an option. And so we approached the entire development and test program with safety at the forefront. And what that means is there is a very incremental, very careful buildup of testing. Like you launch a rocket, and either goes to space or it goes to pieces. And you can't do that with an airplane. But what you can do with an airplane is proceed through what's called expansion of the flight envelope, which means like what speeds, altitudes, conditions has the airplane flown in. You can step through it incrementally, like one at a time. Like go do this, check and see did it go like we thought it would, or did we find something surprising? Okay, great, good. Go to the next one. So like the first flight of the airplane was about a little like about 10 months from first flight to first supersonic flight. And the first flight of the airplane was very simple. It was all about takeoff and landing. Can we take off, fly in a circle, and put the airplane back on the ground? Does it fly like we thought it would fly? We didn't even retract the landing gear on the first flight. And then we found one thing we wanted to change. We changed it. And the second flight, we checked that, and the landing gear came up. And then every flight after that was, checking either a system coming online for the first time or going to a combination of speed and altitude that we hadn't seen before. Like you watch rocket launches, and they always talk about max Q as like the most demanding time on the airplane, and that's about maximum dynamic pressure, which is like how much ambient pressure is there, basically times speed. Because then you're running, like the airplane, rocket is like running into that pressure, and so speed times ambient pressure is dynamic pressure, and so before we went supersonic, we already tested the same dynamic pressure we would have by basically flying Mach 0.95 at a low altitude. Gives us the same dynamic pressure that we get at Mach 1.1 at a higher altitude. And so we already tested that dynamic pressure. We already tested vibration and all these other things. And so when we're going to go for supersonic for the first time, we have eliminated every possible risk we could conceivably eliminate besides the literal shift in aerodynamics as you go through the sound barrier. And so there were, theoretically there was some questions left there, but we'd done everything we possibly could to make the outcome, all but a foregone conclusion. And I talked to our test pilot Geppetto before that flight, and he said, Geppetto, yeah, Tristan Brandenburg, call sign Geppetto.
Pretty electric.
Call signs are awesome. Test pilots. We should talk about test pilots because they're a very special breed of human. But Geppetto told me, dude, I'm more nervous about the press conference than the flight.
What about you?
Come on,
I was.
So the thing I was nervous about was that we would have invited everybody to come watch this flight, and then the weather is bad,
right?
Or like we find something in the airplane at the last minute, which like that happens, and then we have to scrub it. We disappoint everybody. So I was nervous about that. Like I got up that morning, and
did you sleep that night?
I did actually, but I got up in the morning. The first thing I did is I looked at my phone at the weather, and it was like, okay, winds are good, temperatures are good, cloud cover is garbage. Like if the clouds don't clear, we can't go. I'm like, damn. And so, get up, go to the airport, like on the drive to the airport, like, man, it's cloudy. I'm like, oh man, like what's going to happen? Is the clouds going to clear? And I go into the hangar, and the team is in, the flight test team is in their pre-brief, which is, it's one of the pillars of safety culture is every flight has a pre-brief and a debrief. And only the people who are actively part of the test event are in those meetings. Like I don't go to them. Like only the people working the test are in those meetings because being able to speak candidly is really important. And we don't want to do anything that could like silence good feedback. So, so I'm standing in the hangar. It looks like the clouds are starting to clear. And then the team comes out of the debrief. And, sorry, I get very emotional about this. They start getting the airplane ready to tow out of the hangar. And the moment I saw that happening, I teared up because then I knew it was going to happen.
And why is this emotional for you?
I mean, it's, almost 11 years of fighting for this and not giving up. And a heck of a lot of near-death experiences, like metaphorically at least. The company has nearly failed so many times. There's so many times we're looking at a problem and it's like, okay, this feels like the startup equivalent of a cancer diagnosis. Like, are we going to overcome this one? And it took a lot of getting through a lot of those experiences to get to that day. Not just by me, but like by everybody. And a bunch of people gave up along the way, but enough people didn't that we got there. And I just feel incredibly lucky to have be able to be part of that effort.
And when you see the plane, sun glimmering off of it, coming out of the hangar, you just knew it was go time.
I could feel it. Yeah, it was a go time. And like, I wasn't worried about the flight. I was worried about whether we'd be able to do the flight.
Interesting. And
so like when it went supersonic and like everyone's like, yay. And like my friends are out there with me and our investors are out there with me and, and like everyone's like high-fiving me and hugging me and they're like, you did it. And like that moment felt weird because I'm like, yeah, I knew we would.
Like it was much more emotional for you when the plane was ready to rock.
When the plane was leaving the hangar, that was the moment that for me it was going to happen.
Yeah. And you then showed off a little bit, did like 6 runs at it.
Yeah, I mean, so that was actually not the plan. The plan was one long supersonic run, get all the data we need, and we had a couple things. Flight test is flight test, and like never does everything go exactly like the plan. And we trained for a bunch of different scenarios, and we'd been joking about like, oh, there's a lot of yahoos in the test airspace out in Mojave. People kind of do whatever they want to do, and so one thing that happened was, this sounds like such a joke. Like we got cut off by an F-16.
What do you mean?
Meaning like literally we're going this way and there's like an F-16 going this way and the control room is like, knock it off, stop, slow down. And there's an F-16 ahead.
Like randomly?
They were like doing a training flight and then tested.
This was on the first flight?
This was in the first supersonic flight.
Did you get to...
Yeah, we were supersonic, and then we had to like slow down and drop out of supersonic. And I was like, "Come on, people, no sky rage! Like we were getting cut off." I mean, it's just in a way, it's like funny and epic, right? Because like, oh, we're flying supersonic, and then we got cut off by an F-16. So okay, great. We didn't get all the data we needed because the run wasn't long enough. So we like let the F-16 go by. We turn around, we accelerate again, and then I think we ran out of airspace. Because there's like a test corridor, so we had to make a U-turn in the test airspace and get supersonic again. So it was, Geppetto was funny about it afterwards, because people were asking him what is it like, for the airplane to fly supersonic, and it actually, XB1 flies better supersonic than it does subsonic. Like it's the best, smoothest condition for that airplane. It's just designed.
It's like a performance sports car that's going fast.
Yeah, and it's like locked in.
Yeah.
At when it's supersonic, and Geppetto's like, yeah, it was her happy place. Like she really liked it. I had to do it 3 times.
That's awesome. And now how far are you away from carrying passengers on this thing?
About 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
And what's the stated goal in 4 years? Like if let's say like I fly a lot. Like when
my condolences.
Yeah, when will I what will I be experiencing in 4 years?
Yeah, so in 4 years, it'll be like the first handful of airplanes have been delivered to the first airline and the first routes have been launched. And I think there are going to be like multiple chapters of Boom Skeptics. And like chapter 1 was startup can't build a supersonic jet. Okay, put that one behind us. Then the next chapter is a startup can't build a jet engine. We're going to put that one behind us. And then the next chapter will be a startup can't possibly FAA certify an airliner. We'll put that one behind us. And then the next chapter, I think this will be like where we'll be at 4.5 years from now, is they can't build them fast enough. They're not going to be able to produce them at scale like that. And like that will be the next hurdle.
Sounds like SpaceX.
There are a lot of parallels. And like I was definitely like there would be no Boom if it weren't for SpaceX, because I don't know if I could have gotten my head around the idea that there's a chance this was possible.
And how many people can will the plane fit?
Yeah, so again, we're designing for product market fit here, and the fairly obvious principle is the more expensive the ticket, the smaller the number of passengers and the smaller the airplane should be. So we're designing for profitability at a business class fare. So how many seats should the airplane have? Well, about the same numbers others have in business class, because then you can fill the seats and make money. And so we're 64 seats on Overture 1. And 64 like really nice seats. The one thing they don't do is fold flat, because when the flight's 3, 4, 5 hours, you sleep on the ground in a much better bed than any flat bed on an airplane. So that was, by the way, that was the original idea. In some ways,
and you get more seats because it doesn't go flat.
Exactly. That was like 2 weeks in. That was
meaning what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt, but what you're saying is like, look, like this idea of a 10-hour flight is gone.
Right.
So like if you're going 5 hours, what's the point of sleeping?
Well, right. You sleep on the ground and like you're awake on the airplane. It's much better.
Right.
Like the same way we don't put flatbeds on 3-4 hour domestic flights. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So the flatbed is really about, is it an overnight flight on a sufficiently long route that it makes sense to like take up more space on the airplane for a like a bed. And I put that in scare quotes because like airplane sleep is not like real sleep. It's like, it's better than not sleeping, but it's not great sleep.
I can't sleep on an airplane no matter what. Doesn't matter where I'm going or what seat I'm in. Makes no difference.
That's terrible. I'm sorry.
It's terrible. So about call it $5-6 grand.
Yeah.
Ish?
Like so to give you an example.
Round trip. $5-6 grand round trip.
Yeah. So I'll give you the economics. So
in a nice seat.
In a nice seat.
TV?
Of course.
Starlink?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't done that, but like unless there's something better than Starlink, it will be Starlink.
There won't be.
I'm sorry?
There won't be.
Yeah, I think probably not, but like we'll see. There's some people trying to catch up. But we're
still trying to get Starlink onto every normal flight right now.
Right,
so.
yeah, and hopefully that happens quickly because it's so painful now. But so here's a crazy thing. If you look at the satellite antennas on today's airplanes, they're all these like humps on the back of like, it's like a camel's hump, and it's like terrible for aerodynamics. And like why? Because there has been no new airplane designed in the post Wi-Fi era. Think about that for a second. The last time Boeing or Airbus launched an all-new airplane was 21 years ago. The 787 and the A350 were both launched in 2004. And that was like really pre-airplane Wi-Fi. And so every Wi-Fi installation is retrofitted on the airplane.
And those are the only two airplane manufacturers in the U.S.
I mean, so there's Boeing in the U.S., there is, Airbus in Europe, obviously, and those are the only ones that make like international scale airplanes. There's Bombardier and Embraer, but they do like small regional things, right? And so basically it's a duopoly, and they both really they like stopped creating new products. Yeah. I mean, Apple goes like a year without changing the iPhone, and people are like, oh, they can't innovate, like Apple's dead, right? Like what? Boeing went 20 years.
Totally.
And it's like, oh, and this year's software upgrade doesn't work.
Totally.
Right? It's like an incredible U-turn of progress in an industry. But to go back to the Wi-Fi, so Overture is the first airplane designed where like Wi-Fi and satellite connectivity is like table stakes. So guess what? We're building it into the airplane. There's like a bay for the antenna, and it's recessed, so you won't actually see a hump on the back of the airplane.
That's also why it's so expensive to put these internet systems into these planes, because it's so much retrofitting.
There's a lot of retrofitting, and there's a lot of like one-off engineering. Like one of the there are many kind of
even most private planes don't have good internet.
No, I think
which is crazy to think about.
I think it'll change quickly because like Starlink is fixing it.
It's still expensive to put Starlink in there.
Yeah,
because they have to retrofit the plane.
They do, but also they've learned they can charge a lot for it.
Right, right.
Yeah. I mean, they're like so we flew Starlink Supersonic, and it's actually a great story in a lot of ways. It basically was 15 days from like having the idea. Wait a minute, we should do a live stream. It'd be great if there was an air-to-air live view of going supersonic. Okay, we've got our test airplane. We've got a chase airplane that's basically a fighter jet that follows it. We want to put a camera on the chase airplane in a live stream. Can we put Starlink in there? And so we called our friends at SpaceX and we're like, can you give us a Starlink Mini that's like unlocked to go fast? And they're like, sure. And so they sent us one, and we like 3D printed some hardware so we could like get it on the airplane. And then the team had so much fun. They like ground tested it in the chief flight test engineer's Miata to like go more than 100 miles an hour and confirm the unit was unlocked the way it was supposed to be. And it would work at different angles.
Yeah, confirm the unit was unlocked. Right.
Yeah. Like they had a lot of fun doing the ground test in the Miata. But then we put on the T-38, and like literally that like first supersonic flight that more than 2 million people have watched now was filmed on an iPhone and streamed on Starlink.
Epic. And is the so you said about 60 seats in the plane, is that right? And 60 seats, call it $5-6 grand until the regulations change. I mean, what you're working towards very clearly is that the plane won't be ready for production for another 4 years. You're going to work on the regulations so that you can fly over land over those next 4 years. So I can take my SF to New York flight or whatever.
Right.
And how is the configuration of the plane? So no lay flats.
Yeah.
Is there aisles?
Yeah. So the final configuration's a secret still.
Come on.
Yeah, no, I can't do it.
What do you mean it's a secret?
It's a secret.
What part of it's a secret?
So the actual floor plan layout, we have something that I think people are going to lose their shit over, and we're not quite ready to show it yet. But what I can tell you is the airplane, for aerodynamic optimization, it's the first airliner that's not the same size front to back. It's actually bigger in the front and smaller in the back. And that's a principle called area ruling. It like makes supersonic flight way more efficient if you tailor the fuselage. And so the Concorde is famously cramped. And what we wanted to do is create a great first impression and a great experience at every seat, and an overall like sweat the design details on the airplane the same way like a Johnny Ive would, so that like so the passengers feel very cared for. And in that stressful experience that is travel, like Overture should be an oasis in the skies. And so a few things I can share with you is that the boarding door is 10 inches taller than Concorde's was. That's an inch taller than a 737 boarding door. So a 95th percentile North American male can walk on board without getting a haircut. And the front of the airplane, the boarding door is where the airplane's biggest. So you walk into this, like we've got this mock-up of it in our offices. It's really surprising. People walk on, they go, wow, this is like an 8-foot like cathedral ceiling in the front of what is like a pretty small supersonic jet. And then the tube gets narrower as you go to the back of the airplane, but the seats actually get better. The best seats are in the back of the airplane. And the worst cross-section at the very back of the airplane is the same cross-section you get in a G650, so which is the best private jet. So the worst row in Overture is like the best private jet experience.
And is there middle seats?
No middle seats. Middle seats are evil. Like no middle seats.
What do you mean no middle seats? How could that be possible?
I mean, there just aren't any middle seats. We designed a floor plan that doesn't have any middle seats.
Is it 2-2-2?
That would be one way to do it.
Another way to do it would be like a big oval where everybody has a window seat. And in the middle, now you have all this space.
Yeah, we looked at that. It wastes a lot of space. And so the art of airplane interior design is to create great comfort at every seat, enough space at the aisle, and to use the whole space very efficiently. It's like, empty space is wasted, and space is at a real premium. And so how you get to a good answer on this is you need designers that think like engineers and engineers that think like designers, and they intensely collaborate. Like we look at the product design as a product of like engineering plus passenger experience plus airline economics, and you got to get all three of those in sync to build something that will have product market fit. And this goes back to like a little bit of the capital story of the company. There's this like mythology that hard tech startups are more capital intensive than software companies. And there was actually a tweet that went viral yesterday that was showing data that basically says it's not true at all. Like Uber has raised more than SpaceX. Like Airbnb raised more than Anduril. Like the notion that hardware companies consume more capital just isn't true. But the one difference there is like a software company can demonstrate product market fit for small amounts of capital. and a hardware company needs more capital to demonstrate product market fit. And so the one of our early lessons learned was we needed we needed to like consume a software-like amount of capital to prove we were at product market fit before we'd actually built the hardware. And so that's why we did pre-orders. So that's why, like United, American have both placed orders with non-refundable deposits. And so we've done real things to prove that if we ship what we're trying to ship, that it will have product market fit. But then as we go through development, we have to like make sure we don't like lose that along the way. Like there's some, like Eclipse was a airplane company that didn't make it through the financial crisis. And part of what happened was like that airplane died 1,000 cuts as it went through development. And so the thing that they ended up shipping was 3 times more expensive than where they started. It cost more to build than they were selling it for, and it didn't have anywhere close to the performance they targeted on day one. So they sort of like nominally had product market fit, but it like eroded, as it kind of got contorted going through development. And so like every time we do an iteration in development, we rerun the passenger experience and we rerun the airline economics, and we don't let them get out of sync. And so the engineers, the designers, and the commercial people are all like peers in the product development process. We got to keep them all balanced. We call it the 3-legged stool.
In many ways, like redesigning the entire airplane experience is similar to what Elon did with the car. And when you do that, you can do things like, I don't know, put an iPad in there or like make farting noises. Like you can do all sorts of different things. Right. Let alone now seeing things like self-driving. Right? They have just a inherent advantage building it from the ground up with modern day technology inside. Right. That's not having to be retrofitted.
Yeah, that's right. And there's real power in controlling the software and the hardware. And Tesla's demonstrated that, and we've seen it. We've seen it too. So the avionics on our test airplane was mostly off the shelf hardware, but it was our own software for the primary flight display. And we did we're releasing the photo next week, and it's going to be a really epic photo. Something called a Schlieren image, which is a way you can take a picture of the airplane going supersonic and actually see the shockwaves. But to do this requires incredible flying. There's a camera on the ground pointed at the sun, and you have to fly between the camera and the sun as they're pressing the trigger. And to do that, the airplane has to be supersonic, plus or minus 250 feet from target altitude, plus or minus 3 seconds from time on goal. And by the way, we're doing this while flying at a faster speed than we've ever flown before. So it's some incredible flying by the test pilot. But how do we enable that to be possible? Well, we designed a guidance system to help the pilot get in the right place in the sky at the right time, and we call it JPS. The Jason positioning system, because Jason did it. and it was like 2 weeks from the idea to the codes on the airplane. And so, like if we've been working with a traditional vendor, like you can't ship flight critical software in 2 weeks.
That is so crazy. And can you just tell me, is the innovation that you think is going to blow people's minds, is it a configuration thing? Is it a software thing?
It's the speed, right?
Well, yeah, obviously. But you were saying like, we're not ready to announce like...
the inside the airplane?
Inside the airplane.
It is a comfort thing.
Comfort thing.
Yeah. Imagine, part of my journey to doing this was 10 years of thinking, what would an airplane be like if Apple had designed it? And I was asking that question that, the Steve and Johnny era. And when I started to ask that question, I would see all these things that you just can't unsee. Like look at a window of a commercial airplane and count how many like visual seams and gaps there are between the outside of the window and the inside of the airplane. It's visually cluttered, and it'd be like think about devices that were built not by Apple or pre-Apple, where like the bezels have like border and border and border and border, and they're just nasty. Yeah. And they're visual. I think most people don't notice it consciously, but it contributes to like the visual clutter.
An all glass plane.
That's a bad idea for multiple reasons.
Like aesthetically glass.
We are working to reduce the visual clutter.
Yeah.
And like literally, if you come to our passenger experience lab, we have a mock-up of like several different window treatments where it's about how do we go from outside of an airplane to inside of an airplane in the most tranquil way possible.
And you're not gonna be a commercial airliner yourself. You're selling to the airlines.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like one hard problem at a time kind of thing. Like, there are airlines that are great at running operations, that have distribution, that know how to, like, airlines are very complex businesses. And it's also important that we have the airlines there so we know we have product market fit. And so, United was the first to place an order, and they've been a great friend of what we're doing. And, I think, Scott Kirby, who's the CEO there, Mike Leskinen, who's CFO, has demonstrated they're the most visionary team of any airline anywhere on the planet. And they're willing to throw in like pretty early. And then they actually really help. They help us look at the economics. Their technical people work with our technical people, and we do technical reviews. Like, United's in them. And so, like, how do we fly an approach? What is the cockpit like? How do we cater the airplane? Their people are right with our people, making sure that when we deliver a product that like every stakeholder loves it.
Did you grow up flying planes?
No, I grew up wanting to fly planes. My parents tell me that I had a fascination with airplanes since I was 6 months old. And but I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and like innovation was happening on the internet, right? It wasn't happening in airplanes. And so it didn't occur to me to have a career in aviation because nothing's happening. And but I remember having a friend in high school who got flying lessons, and I remember feeling really jealous. And in the summer of 2000, I was here in the Bay Area.
Doing what?
I was a software intern at Inktomy. If we can remember that company, it became Yahoo Search.
Wait, who started Inktomy?
Who started Inktomy? Brian Toddy and
who else do I know?
Some other people.
Who else?
I think there were a lot of great people at Inktomy.
Who else do I know? I swear I've had people on the show that were at Inktomy. Anyway,
there were a lot of great people at Inktomy. Like, it was like a great fortune to be there when I was like a sophomore in college.
Okay.
Writing code for internet infrastructure. But it was like one exit down the 101 from San Carlos Airport, and I'm this well-paid tech intern. I'm like, wait a minute, I could get a flying lesson? And so I was taking flying lessons while I was coding at Inktomy.
And then what?
It was a hobby. And I think it took me 8 years to actually get my pilot's license because I kept not focusing on it.
You were doing software engineering work.
Yeah. I went to Amazon after school, and I took some lessons and then stopped taking some lessons. And eventually I was at this startup in Seattle.
You spent years at Amazon, right?
I spent 5 years at Amazon, and then I was at Pelago, which was actually the very first iFund company. And I was first employee there. And it was while I was at Pelago that I was like, okay, Blake, you've been telling your friends forever that you love flight. You still haven't gotten your pilot's license done. You need to commit and get this done. And so it was 2007, 2008 that I finally got that done.
But you're still this is my hobby.
Oh, it's totally my hobby.
My career is software engineering.
Yeah.
And you were tell me if I'm mistaken, but you were quite successful in your career doing at Amazon. I've heard that you were a rising star there.
I mean, I was very lucky to get to do some things that were high visibility. To Jeff, at a remarkably young age. So people told me later I was the youngest ever manager at Amazon. I don't think I was 22 or 23, and I didn't even know it at the time.
And how big was your team?
5 or 6 people, and then it became. I think the biggest team I ever had at Amazon was maybe 10.
Okay.
I sort of imagined myself standing next to a rocket ship, and the rocket takes off, and my jacket got caught on it. And so the thing I did at Amazon that I was very fortunate to get to do was the very first ad buy from Google. And so back then, this is 2002, 2003. So it's starting to become clear that web search matters. Maybe search engine marketing will matter. And the way everyone is doing search engine marketing is manually buying keywords. So you go to AdWords.google.com, and you type in your ad, and you type in your keyword, and you pick your landing page, and there's basically no tracking. And so our insight was there are 300 million unique searches on the web every month. everyone's doing advertising by hand, which means all the advertisers are piling up on a tiny number of keywords and bidding those prices up, while 80% of web searches have no ads. And we said, well, let's start by ignoring the popular, expensive stuff. Let's just go buy all the ads that have like nothing on the page, and we'll deep link into the exact most relevant things. But to do this, we'll need automation. So we built what was the first automated ad buying system, and it would basically like spray and pray ads. Like it would like Mad Lib them, and then we'd track every click. We'd see what people bought. We knew the profit per every item sold. We could figure out what to bid in the ad auction, and we were doing all of this with like a screen scraper that would like log into Google and like click buttons. And so it didn't work at first, but eventually we got it to work. And it ended up, I didn't know this until later. A friend at Google told me, but there was a point in time where this was 7% of Amazon's revenue and 7% of Google's revenue at the same time.
Wow. So you have a good run there. You go to Pelago.
I had a good run, yeah.
Go to Pelago.
Yeah.
Have a good run there.
Yeah, sort of. Like, I think Pelago was a very ambitious company. It was like Foursquare plus Google Maps plus Yelp on a Motorola Razr in 2006. And it actually had like a surplus of good ideas and in a deficit of focus. And the company really never worked. There are great people there. And we built some like amazing stuff, but we never got to product market fit. And like ultimately that company got like acqui-hired.
And you spent 3 years there?
I spent like 4 years there. Yeah.
And then what? Did you see it through the acqui-hire?
No, like I like left a year before the acqui-hire and I started my own thing, which
another software thing.
Another software thing.
It's just crazy that we're continuing to still talk about software things. Like random software tech companies.
Right. So I'm at Amazon. So I theoretically I know e-commerce, and then I go to Pelago, which, like I said, is the first like iPhone company. So like one of the first mobile app companies. So I figure I know mobile, and like, what should I work on? I should work on mobile e-commerce. So I start this thing called Kima Labs, and I'm like, we should work on a mobile e-commerce idea, and so we end up making. I can't say this with a straight face. We end up making a barcode scanning game. And like we never got that to technically it worked, but we never got it to be anything that like really took off. People play with it. And I was working like crazy and constantly worried about failure. And it was like I kind of wished I'd never done it.
While you were doing it.
While I was doing it, like I was like extremely depressed. Like my mental health was terrible because I'm like, what am I doing? Why did I get into this? Like how do I get out of it?
Why?
I'm going to fail. Like, I'm like,
why? It felt gimmicky to you?
Well, that undermined my motivation. But then there was just like any startup, there's always a risk of failure. And I think I like overestimated how bad failure would be. And I was very worried about the impact on my career and my reputation. And it wasn't, and yet the prize was like not meaningful. Like, wait a minute, I'm building a barcode scanning game for people who shop in stores, and I don't play games and I don't shop in stores. I'm an e-commerce nerd, and I don't play video games. Like, what am I doing? And so like theoretically my resume said I had competence for it. And yeah, we successfully shipped a bunch of apps and they were well-built apps, but there was like no inspiring product, and I had no product intuition because I was building what I thought I knew how to build, not creating something I wanted to exist.
Mm-hmm. And you said overestimating the risk of failure. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think one of the things that's great about the Valley is that there is enormous, I'll say forgiveness or maybe even admiration for honest failures. Distinguished here very much from dishonest failures that are different. But I hadn't internalized that. Like, I didn't know. Like, I was very afraid of like the company not working, and in reality, it basically was a failure. Like, we were lucky to be at a point in time where we could acqui-hire the company, and like we went back and like retroactively changed the liquidation preference such that in the acqui-hire the investors would make money, and it was a very unique point in time that something like that was possible. But it was basically a failure. But then like failure was okay. The investors actually did get their money back. Probably would have been okay if they hadn't. We'd only raised a seed round. And then I got kind of 2 years to, do stuff at Groupon.
Who acqui-hired you?
Yeah. While kind of reflecting on that entire experience and trying to figure out what I'd learned from it.
And?
Like what I learned was that I definitely wanted to do another startup.
Why?
I don't know how to articulate that. It's like, it was like my first flight. Like the very first time I took a flying lesson, it was like something I knew I wanted to do. Like, wow, this is experience of like, I've got my life in my own hands, and it's simultaneously scary and thrilling. And I think entrepreneurship is a little bit like that. Like, it's just like, it bit me, and I don't know if I can explain well why it did. But, I started a company in my parents' basement in high school. I didn't, I kind of knew I wanted to go build stuff from scratch and like create. And I'm driven enough that no matter what I do entrepreneurially, I'm going to be at my personal red line. And I think actually the difficulty of startups is actually not set by the problem, it's set by the founder, because we run at our red line, and being at our red line from an effort perspective is going to feel the same regardless of whether we're building a supersonic jet or a barcode scanning game. Like, the effort's actually the same. And the way it feels, and the fear of failure, and like the high highs and the low lows, like the pain, I think, is actually the same. But the rewards are completely different.
Like, if you fail at a barcode scanning company, it'll probably, the idea of failing in that company feels just as bad as failing in a supersonic jet company.
It actually feels much worse, because like, wait a minute, this is a stupid mobile app. You couldn't make that work,
right?
Versus like, I started a supersonic jet company, and like all my friends like roll their eyes, and they're like, all right, dude, like tell me when you got something that's pie in the sky. Obviously that's going to fail.
Yeah.
So it's actually like way more socially acceptable to fail at a supersonic jet than to fail at a barcode scanning game.
Right. That makes sense.
And the first 18 months working on Boom, like, felt very light, because I thought our odds of success were like basically zero.
Yeah. You're playing with house money.
Yeah. I'm playing with house money.
But before you get there, you spent 2 years at Groupon?
Yeah.
Like investing?
No, I mean, I like worked hard, and like I did stuff, but like, the first year I was working on.
And were you miserable? Were you as miserable then as you were?
Oh, I mean, it was like, so the first year at Groupon, I was working on iPad-based point of sale for restaurants. That was really about what should have been Groupon 2.0, and that was actually a lot of fun. Like, Groupon was like such a story of like missed potential. If they had shipped their 2.0 platform, this would be $100 billion company, and they, it's a different conversation, but they screwed that up. The founding CEO got fired at the worst possible time, and the next guy didn't have the vision for it, and so they like kind of rode their core business. They rode the email marketing business all the way into the ground. But my second year there, I had to run the core business, and I was like, I owned like email and like relevance, like all of the core deal stuff, including like the world's like most obnoxious spam cannon, and that was miserable. I mean, it wasn't as stressful as doing my own startup,
yeah.
But it was like, I'm working a lot of hours. They're low stress hours because I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight of the whole thing on my shoulders the way I am from founder CEO. But it wasn't motivating. Like, am I here on Earth to like send more email?
Right. And at what point did you build the courage to not just start another company, but this one?
Well, I like sort of fired myself from Groupon.
What do you mean?
And I mean, like, I was saving up money because it was, the earnout was, nice. And my head was, I'm going to save a certain amount for my family. And then anything I save beyond that goes into the fund. And in my head, the fund was, I get to buy an airplane. And
for yourself.
For myself. And there was one I was like, okay, the longer I stay here, the more I put up with this, the better that airplane gets. And so eventually,
so you're making good money.
I was making good money.
And Groupon at the time, for those that don't remember, was actually like a high-flying company.
It was on the way down at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're still making good money.
I was making good money, but like the company was actively burning its stock seed. Like, it'd be like every quarter, it would be like, hey, revenue is soft. Like, we got to make the quarter. We're not going to make the quarter. And and the CEO would call me and he'd be like, Blake, send more email. And I'm like, that's why people unsubscribe, right? Like this is why this quarter is soft because last quarter we sent too much email. And he's like, I don't care. Like, we'll fix it next quarter. And it's just like we're burning our stock seed, people. So that was anyhow. So I fire myself basically. I was like, I can't. The airplane getting better is not worth like continuing to run the spam machine. And And so I almost actually bought the airplane, but that
Are we talking like a G7?
No.
Like a prop plane.
This was like a base hit. This was an acqui-hire.
Okay.
This is like
sure.
This is like savings, not wealth.
Right. Okay.
And so like I could have, if I'd spent half of what I made, I could have gotten a like a single engine plane.
Okay.
Right. And I almost did, but then that became the seed money for Boom. So my joke now is I'm never actually going to own an airplane, but the one I've got my eye on keeps getting better.
And so you're saving money, and then you fire yourself. At the time when you fired yourself, did you know that Boom was coming next?
No, like I kind of thought I would start something, but I wandered for a little bit. Like I interviewed for a couple jobs, and then I ultimately I remember seeing an interview with Eric Schmidt. And he was talking about Google's mission and this notion of like organizing the world's information, and and what an audacious mission it was. And he made the point, and this really influenced me. He said audacious missions are easier than less audacious missions because they attract better people. And I remember hearing that and thinking that's really true, and it's true not just for the whole team; it's true for the founder. And I'm like, what could I work on where no matter how hard it was, I would never regret trying. And so rather than thinking about, I remember thinking like my first company, like I made all these terrible decisions. Let me just invert all those decisions. Instead of working on what I think I'm competent to create, what if I work on what I want to exist, and forget whether I'm competent to do it. And so for me, anything with an airplane in it went to the top of the list. And I started saying like, okay, I would just look at all my startup ideas in order of how happy I would personally be if they worked, and forget everything else. And just, I figured I'd like worked on that list and end up on like idea number 4 or 5. And, by good fortune, I'm still on idea number 1. And I think I've come to believe, and this is, if I could like share like one thing with founders, like passion and drive trumps knowledge and experience. Like if you imagine yourself on like the day of IPO, like 99% of what you needed to know to get to that day, you didn't know on day 1. You're going to learn a lot along the way. You're going to learn how to build a team and how to get to product market fit and how to run sales and how to do comms and investor relations. There's all this stuff you have to learn how to run a company, and that you don't know virtually any of it on day 1. So why not take 99% to 99.5% and like work on the thing you really want to exist, even if you don't know anything about it yet?
Okay, fair. So you go home. You write down your list.
Yeah.
You have a wife? Husband?
I had a wife then.
You had a wife then?
Yeah. I had 2 marriages that didn't survive. Boom. But yes.
It was Boom.
I don't, or maybe it was my poor judgment, but yes.
Okay. And
but I remember I remember like
when
I was
married at the time.
I was married at the time. Like I had 3 young children.
In your first marriage?
Yes.
When you're ideating on Boom.
Yeah, ideating on Boom. Like I remember like watching this like Steve Jobs video, and where he said something like, "There's one simple secret, and that the world was made up by people no smarter than you are, and you can change it. You can build your own things, and like once you discover that, you're never going to be the same." And I remember thinking, "Wow!" And like part of me was like, "Yeah, no smarter than you are, Steve." But then like part of it like felt like he was talking to me, and I'm like, "Man, I want to do that." And I remember being so excited, and I went and I showed my wife the video, and she was like, "What an asshole." And I'm like, man, like I still feel inspired. And so I wanted to, I think my daughter was 14 months old. I had twins that were like basically just born. And I'm like, I want to go all in.
And what'd she say?
She said, you have to get a job in a year after you screw around with this.
You have a year.
You have a year. Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Like fair compromise.
Fair compromise. Yeah. And then to her credit, like we picked up and moved the entire family to Denver to like build the company there. And so I'm grateful for that.
Wow. And how did you so you set out on like, okay, so you go like the Elon version of this is he's like, I'm going to send, what was it? Like a plant or something to space to get people inspired by rockets again.
Right.
And then he realized, like this is actually way harder than I thought. The economics don't make sense. Where are all the rockets that I can go send up? Oh no, I think I have to build my own rocket to do this. Right. Well, if I'm going to build my own rocket, I might as well send people to space. It was like this gradual progression.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar progression?
I mean, No is probably the short answer. Like, I never went through the, like, let's just do a stunt to inspire people stage.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to birth the product.
Yeah.
And the most analogous thing to, like, yeah, I think Elon tried to buy, I think the idea was he wanted to, like, put a plant or any kind of living thing on Mars. And his idea was to go buy a decommissioned Soviet ICBM to, like, launch, I don't know, like a plant to Mars. And the Russians wouldn't sell it to him.
Yeah.
And the most analogous thing in Boom history was how we got to, our jet engine solution. Is we wasted a bunch of time trying to get, like, the big engine companies to build us a custom jet engine. And that was, like, a total failure. And that turned into a, like, well, we got to build our own. And that was, people said we were crazy to build our own jet engine. And I now very firmly believe we were crazy to do it any other way.
Huh.
And that's unlocked a bunch of things. Like, this whole Boomless cruise thing we're talking about would not have worked without our custom engines.
Right.
Like, the off-the-shelf engines that we could have gotten from a big company did not have the transonic performance to do it. They broke the sound barrier at too low of an altitude. The bottom of the U would hit the ground. And also that, like, thing I was teasing about earlier, the passenger experience, and what the configuration of the airplane is. The breakthrough I can't share, we came up with a little bit more than a year ago. And the engineers and the designers basically said, we got to show you something. If you're willing to change the shape of the airplane very slightly, like, this new insane floor plan gets unlocked. And we first ran it through our performance analysis tools. We lost 1,000 miles of range. And that's like going from, like, 4,000 miles of range to 3,000. It means a whole bunch of routes you can't fly nonstop anymore. We're like, ugh, can't do that. And we got to, but we really, like, I remember saying to the team, like, do we want to fly on this airplane or are we going to fly on that airplane? Everyone's like, yeah, that one. Like, that's the hot one. We don't know if we can make it work, but let's figure out how. And the how turned out to be really working the airplane and the engine together to get them, like, optimized to meet each other. And we got back the vast majority of that 1,000 miles of range by tuning the engine to match the airplane, and which we could not have done if we were getting it from somebody else.
Wow. And so did you, like, how do you didn't know, like, just because you're like a pilot for fun, you didn't know a thing about building jets.
No, I mean, I had to, had to learn it all.
Like, how? Like, what was your initial instinct on learning?
Well, the very first thing was, like, the 3-line spreadsheet that said that the economics. So the initial idea, which turns out to still be the key idea, is if you can make a supersonic seat match the economics of a flatbed in business class, you can get a very large market, and you don't need the flying bed. You just need a seat. And to do that requires a less than 10% improvement in fuel efficiency versus Concorde. And so that seemed like, the moment I saw them, like, that doesn't sound like insane. I don't know anything, but that sounds feasible. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I imagine myself, I'm like, okay, take your own ego out of this. Forget that you're looking at this. Imagine the year is 2050 and you're sitting on the beach, like, sipping Mai Tais, reading the aviation history books, and you're reading about how the world made the transition to supersonic flight. How do you think that history goes? Is it after 150 years of not doing it, Boeing finally did it? Like, probably not. Like, history never goes like that. Like, okay, it's going to be a new company. It's going to be probably somebody from outside the industry, because everyone from the inside the industry is going to believe it's impossible. Okay, so imagine that outside industry effort. What would it look like? What will the attributes be that will be part of the success story? Well, okay, they're going to have to be really great at articulating a vision for why this matters long before it comes to fruition. They're going to be really good at persuading people to join the team. They're going to be an amazing recruiter. They're going to be, like, an amazing salesperson in order to be able to get, like, airlines and suppliers to come along with, like, a new company. Like, basically, you're going to be this minnow in a very large ocean who's got to get the sharks to like, swim in formation. So, like, building communication and persuasion is going to be really important. And also, you're going to need a dream team. And you're going to need a lot of really great engineers. And the great engineers are going to want to work for somebody technical who understands the actual engineering. And so the leader in this thing has to understand the product. They can't just be a business person. And so, like, so it was very clear from day zero. Okay, if I look in the mirror, I'm not the person who can do this. I need to become that person. I need to transform myself. And the first order of business was to learn the technical skills. So I took a deep breath. I'm like, okay, I have to actually understand this. So I went and did Khan Academy, like, remedial calculus and physics, because I hadn't had any since high school. And I bought every textbook I could find from like college, aerospace engineering courses, and I could read them, and I would do the problem sets. And if I couldn't figure it out, I'd throw that book out and get a different book, and try to get through the problem sets on that. I took an airplane design class, and just started building a spreadsheet model of the airplane. And I kept a Google Doc as I was going. That was my confusion doc, and whenever I came across something that I could tell I didn't really understand, I would write it down. And my idea was like every week I would take one thing off that list. And eventually I had the very false idea that it would get to zero. It turns out it actually grows without bound. But the mental skill behind that is really important. Like I am confused all the time, or at least frequently. But I think I have like I'm tuned in, and I know when I understand and when I don't understand. I know when I'm waving my hands and when I understand from first principles. And so getting to a real first principles understanding on the things that matter is really important. And I think people can do that. Like it took me, I remember somebody I talked to in the very early days who kind of rolled their eyes. A year later became one of our early employees. And he was like, wow, like a year ago you were kind of like, didn't know what you were talking about, but now you sound like you've worked in the industry for 15 years. And so like that, if you're passionate and driven, my experience has been that I can accrete the knowledge and skills that I need.
And who did you call to like?
So I remember going to LinkedIn, so it turns out one of the key enabling technologies for Boom is LinkedIn.
God, that's actually so sad.
No, I think it's great. It's great because how could I have found the people for this?
I'd like to think it's an engine or something, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the engine matters too, but it never would have started without LinkedIn, because I don't know how I would have found the people. It would have been far more difficult. And so I remember going to LinkedIn, and you can connection equals first degree, industry equals aerospace, and it says no results. I don't know anybody in this industry. Not a soul. And I'm like, okay, second degree. And there was a guy who worked at SpaceX who was connected to one of my direct reports at Groupon. And I remember writing the email hey, Brett, how well do you know Jamie? Do you know him well enough to introduce us? Because I've got an aerospace idea and I want to talk about it. And Brett's like, oh yeah, we played hockey in college together. And says, okay, somebody who worked for me at Groupon had played college hockey with somebody who now worked at SpaceX. And so I got that intro, and then I flew from Palo Alto to Hawthorne, which is where SpaceX headquarters is, on a little airplane I could fly myself, on a little rental single engine airplane. And I showed up to the meeting, and the only thing I had that was credibility was I'd shown up to the meeting in an airplane and flown myself. But actually that did add meaningful cred. Because people, for whatever reason, people respect that.
For sure. I mean, it's also pretty gangster.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah. So, I ended up making a lot of laps from Palo Alto to LA to Hawthorne to the Mojave Desert, just trying to meet people. And I would basically find the best person that I could get a meeting with. And I would say, if you could wave a magic wand and get anybody in the planet to come work with you on this, who would your top 5 people be? And don't worry about whether they want to do it. Don't worry about whether they're available or gainfully employed. All that matters is, are they the person that you want in the trenches doing this with you? And so that guy gave me 5 names, and then I met those people and I asked them the same questions. So I was recursively searched my network, and pretty soon I was actually talking to some of the best people on the planet.
And at this point, had you raised money?
No, it was all
Were you still using your fund?
Yeah, I was using the fund. I hired the first 8 or 10 people out of the fund.
That's pretty good.
And it was I'm playing chicken with my bank account. I got to stop doing this. I need to raise at some point.
So you raised money from Y Combinator?
No, it was before YC. We raised a seed round, which turned out to be almost exactly the same seed round size that my first company had raised. It was $770K. And it was incredibly difficult to raise that. I remember getting to closing day and thinking is anybody actually going to send their wire? But we had gotten we got a handful of people to do it, and I put in another 100K in that round. But one of the people in that round was Sam Altman, and he had been doing Looped while I was doing Pelago. And so I sort of knew of him that way because Looped and Pelago, it was like the Kleiner bet and the Sequoia bet,
right,
for the same idea,
right,
ish anyway. And so I knew of Sam that way, and we had some mutuals, and so I got connected to Sam, and Sam's a pilot, and Sam loved this, and he's like your seed round is overpriced, so I will write you only a small check, but he wrote us a check, and then he kept telling me to do YC, and doing YC turned out to be a massive unlock. Like, this company would not exist if it weren't for YC.
Why?
Multiple layers to it. Like, the most superficial layer is that it was an important endorsement. Like, the moment we decided we're doing YC, it got easier to raise more seed money.
It's like every top venture firm just sprinkles a little magic dust of credibility, doesn't it? Yeah.
So that helped. But like the biggest thing that helped, I remember going through YC, and like the first few weeks, I'm like, why am I here? Like, there were like 3 aerospace companies in that batch of like 110 companies. And we'd like sit in the corner and we're like everyone else is talking about like SEO, like, why are we here? And then, but what I realized relatively quickly is that most of the things that every startup was struggling with the same things we were. And, and they said at one point, like, okay, demo day, you better show up with sales or your goose is cooked. And I'm like, wow, I've got 8 weeks. And like, I'd be lucky to sell an airplane in 8 years.
Demo days when you get on stage to all the investors and show your product for 5 minutes.
That's right. Yeah. And it's like, what are we going to show in 8 weeks? Like, we're definitely not going to have a flying supersonic jet in 8 weeks. But we need technical proof and we need commercial proof. And YC really helped with that. And there are like a couple different tracks on it. Like, I realized pretty quickly, okay, on the commercial side, I'm not going to sell airplanes to United in 8 weeks. Like who's gonna put a pre-order for a supersonic jet from a company in some guy's basement? Like, okay, it's either going to be a startup airline or like maybe Virgin would do it. And so basically I focused on startup airlines and Virgin. And so in the run up to demo day, all we had was an LOI from a startup airline. And by the way, that startup airline hadn't finished starting. So it was very questionable whether this actually meant anything. But it was like on paper a $3 billion LOI because, if the product costs $200 million, 15 airplanes gets you there. But it was like pretty flimsy. I remember going to the practice demo day speech. And the other thing I love about YC is PG has built a culture of just incredible directness. And like Michael Siebel said to me, Blake, do you have anything that's real? Because you sound like you're completely full of shit. And I'm like, ow, like that hurt. But like, I think I kind of needed to hear it. And so in parallel, I was working on Virgin, and the way the week of demo day was lined up is they were spread across 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, and like by luck we were on the second day, on Wednesday. So Monday we take the company out of stealth mode, and Ashley Vance, who had been Elon's first biographer, wrote the story. And in my head, this was going to be brilliant because it was going to be like, Boom is the new SpaceX. And what I didn't realize is just how darn early we really were, and how to most of the world we would not look credible. And I let the Bloomberg team, this is not Ashley's fault, but I let the Bloomberg team like take any photo they wanted. So they got this photo of me on an orange plastic chair climbing into a cardboard mock-up. And it's a very awkward photo. And then the editor wrote the headline, which was something like, "This Colorado company thinks it can build supersonic jets." And so like that runs, and there's that picture, and then it's like we're at the top of Hacker News, and it's just brutal. Like, what a stupid company! Don't they know that airplanes aren't made out of cardboard? And like, what idiot runs marketing? Why would you name a supersonic jet company after the sound of an explosion? And it was just like brutal. And that was Monday. And Tuesday, like I'm in an Airbnb on the peninsula, like trying to get ready for demo day. And I'm like, this is like, we are so screwed. Like we're getting our asses handed to us on demo day because like we've got this thing that nobody believes we can really build and like nobody wants it. And
what are you even demoing?
Pre-order. We've got like a picture of like test sections of the wing, and we've like actually we brought an engine to demo day that turned out to be a good move. And we built a model of the airplane because it was like, here's the aerodynamic convention, here's a model of the airplane, here you can see it.
Yeah.
And so that actually helped, but it felt like it was very flimsy. Yeah, flimsy. And then so on Tuesday we got an email from Virgin that said we're in for the first 10 airplanes. You can announce it tomorrow. And I like fell off my chair practically. So I'm like, wait, did I read that email correctly? Because I think we just got saved. And I remember calling the press guys at YC, or gals actually, and I was like, I think I have something newsworthy, and I don't know how to do an announcement. Like, would you help me do this? And so like I stayed up until midnight the night before demo day doing press pre-briefs. And we're like, okay, we're gonna relaunch the company, and so we show up the next day with not 3 billion in LOIs but 5, because now Virgin's in the list, and all of a sudden that added credibility to the story. And that day we're on top of Hacker News again, and the comments are like, Monday : haha, what a stupid company. Wednesday : oh shit. And then another one's like, man, this is how you launch a company. It's the 1-2 punch. And I'm sitting there like, wow, this like almost didn't happen.
Oh my goodness.
And like everyone thinks we planned it. And what happened was we just, busted our asses. And there was in YC, like I really want to give a lot of credit to YC here. Like Jared Friedman, who was one of the group partners then, I was like working on this thing with Virgin. I'm like, I've emailed Branson. He hasn't replied. Like, what do? I don't want to be annoying. And I remember Jared saying, unless you feel really annoying, you're not emailing enough. And so I'm like, okay, I'll pester him more. And it turned out that made the difference.
What? Why? He responded?
Yeah. Like it turned out persistence mattered.
And so what happened? You emailed them more, and then what?
Then they said, okay.
And did you ever end up meeting Branson?
I did. I met him along the way, but I was like trying to turn what had been. So the way that happened was Mark Kelly, who's now Senator Mark Kelly, back then was sort of a semi-retired space shuttle commander, and SV Angel, so like Ron's firm had like helped get him on our advisory board, and so Mark's kind of like helping out. And I'm like, who knows Branson? Well, Mark knows Branson. And so if I like wrote emails from Mark to Richard, like Mark would send them. And so the email from Mark to Richard was basically like, hey, they're these Boom guys, I know you wanted to do Supersonic for a long time. You should meet them. You're going to be in the Mojave Desert rolling out your new spaceship in a few weeks. The Boom guys are going to be there too. You should meet them. And so we tried to get invited to the Spaceship 2 rollout, and we never really got invited. So I sort of like talked my way into it. But we did get 15 minutes with Branson. And it was like at his hotel room in Mojave for 15 minutes, like, basically over breakfast. And he's a very thoughtful, visionary guy. And I'm telling him what we're doing and why. We had a little wooden model of the airplane that we'd painted in Virgin colors. And he's looking, he's just like, man, like I love this, but like, I don't know if I have it in me to do 2 of these things. Like, I'm already doing Virgin Galactic. You want me to do Virgin Supersonic too? And I said, Richard, we're not asking for your money. Like, what we're asking is, when this flies, would you like the first ones to have a Virgin logo on the tail? Like, do you want the airplane first? And if you say yes to that, then I'll go get the money somewhere else. So I don't need your money. I need your belief that you want this product to exist. And so ultimately he went for that.
Wow. And can I ask you, like, when you went home after all of this, and you're like, all right, we raised money at YC. Mm-hmm. Like, honey, guess what? Like, I'm doing like a jet company.
Yeah.
What was the reaction?
There was this sort of progressive, like a little bit of like, whoa, I didn't expect that. Like there were some moments along the way that were like, they led to surprise, I guess. Before I hired anybody, I built an advisory board. And so I'm like, I have like, as I'm walking, I'm like, I have no cred except that like I know enough that at least I make sense mostly when I talk about it. And like I needed to collect people for cred. And so I got in the former SVP of Lockheed Skunk Works to join the advisory board. I got in some people who worked on supersonic flight at Gulfstream to join the advisory board. Like I collected a handful of advisors that sort of added something to the company, and they were saying, actually, this makes sense. And I think that I remember that created an inflection point in belief for people. Not that it like went all the way from 0 to 1, but it went from 0 to like 0.1.
Is this the most important thing in your life?
Right now, the most important things in my life are supersonic flight and being a good dad.
Is this all you think about?
No, like I would love to do way more.
What do you mean?
So one of my reflections on supersonic is no one was working on it, but it was very possible. And I think there's a bystander effect of innovation. Like we tend to get told in the Valley that if our idea is any good, there are already going to be several decent teams working on it. And so like if you're working on something that nobody's working on, like heavily question the idea. It's probably no good. Or there isn't a good answer to why now. And it's terrible advice. And the result of that advice is that there is these like mass rushes of talent into a small number of ideas, while other ideas get completely like ignored. And so for supersonic flight, that was like supersonic flight would obviously be good. Nobody's doing it. It must be a bad idea. And so as a result, no one even looks. Like why am I doing supersonic flight? I was the first like semi-decent entrepreneur to just look. Like I think a whole lot of people could have done this, but they just didn't look. Like people probably far more talented than I am could have done this, probably done it better than I'm doing it, but they didn't look. And as time has gone by, I've come to believe that supersonic flight is not the only thing in that category. Like there are many things in that category that are gigantic businesses, gigantic problems in the world, like waiting to be solved, and like nobody's doing it. And like I wish I could copy paste myself 3 or 4 ways and work on a bunch of these in parallel.
Can you?
Right now, I think it would be irresponsible. It's like we're not far enough along yet in Boom. Like I think
like Elon had to get the rocket into space, get it cooking before he could do some other thing.
I mean, he managed to like save SpaceX and Tesla at the same time.
Yeah.
And like holy Toledo, like mad respect for that. But I almost don't think it'd be fair to our investors to like divide myself prematurely. And there is, I think we've now gotten far enough along. I really hope this is true, that supersonic flight's actually inevitable. I think a month ago, I think it was not inevitable. And that if Boom had failed, the world would have drawn the conclusion that a startup can't build a supersonic jet. But now we've proven that a startup team can. And I think it's inevitable that regulation will change and allow supersonic flight over land. And I think those two things together mean that if we don't succeed, somebody else will. But nonetheless, like I want it to be Boom. And like until that feels assured, I don't think it's responsible for me to go like have another project.
Yeah. I think that's totally fair. Do you think it's possible to be a good dad and be what you are as an entrepreneur?
I mean, ask my kids. I'm definitely not the dad that spends the most time, and I have 4 kids now.
By the way, if this is too personal, don't.
No, it's okay. Like this is life, and I don't. I do conversations like this because I want to be helpful to other entrepreneurs, and I want more people to do more big things, and I don't think I do a service by like sugarcoating things or keeping things off limits. Like it's been tough, and like the worst parts are where I feel like I really, really need to be in 2 places at the same time. And, like since, I took 1 family vacation in 2 years. And like that hurt. But I try to be, when I'm with my kids, I try to be really present, and I won't be the dad that spent the most hours, but the hours I spend, I have the power to make them good hours, and I try to. The kids have the downside of a father, who they're only with half the time to begin with, who is extremely busy. And so at least let me give them the upside of that too. Let me give them a front row seat to something pretty interesting. And, so for example, like my kids came to the first XB1 flight. They came to the first supersonic flight, and let them be inspired by that. And let me tell them the real stories of how it goes and what it takes to create something like this if they want to. And I don't want to force them to be aerospace entrepreneurs, but I want them to learn from me what it means to lock onto something they really care about and be motivated enough to work really hard.
You break a bit of a mental model for me, which is that I've had 225 guests or so on this show, all of whom I consider quite high achieving. And there's only two patterns that I've found. The first is one that you would be right in the bullseye of, which is grit. And the second is actually a strong partner at home.
Yeah.
It's been a surprising pattern that I've found in the show. I always thought that the sacrifice of doing great things was actually your home life, and it's been the opposite. And I'm just thinking out loud with you right now. I wonder if maybe that's I haven't had Steve Jobs or Elon or Richard Branson or Bezos on the show before. I haven't had people that have maybe this audacious of a vision. And I just wonder, I don't actually have a question, but I'm just thinking out loud, is the audacity of the vision so big that in fact you can't have friends, be a good dad, be a good husband at home, and be a good CEO?
My
is
mentor,
that the tax of the audacity, I suppose?
I'm really trying to reject that. One of my closest mentors, Jeff Holden, who basically hired me at Amazon 25 years ago, and then hired me again at Pelago, and then bought my company at Groupon, and now he's on my board, and I'm on his board. I remember asking him once, in Seattle when I was at Pelago, about how he made, because he was a dad and he had a startup, and I how do you think about doing all these things in life? And he said something which is I've always found that when there was something I really cared about, I could always find a way to fit it in, if it mattered enough to me, and that's stuck with me. And so, I try to find a way to have it all fit. And do I wish I had a supportive partner at home? Of course, but I haven't managed to achieve that. Yeah. And so, okay, here I am. I could be a victim, or I could find the best solution I can, and hopefully in 30 years, my kids aren't all in therapy about it.
Yeah.
By the way, I think it's a total. Every parent says children are resilient, and I think it's the biggest lie parents tell themselves.
That what? Their children are actually resilient.
Right. Every adult I know is in therapy dealing with their childhood issues.
Right.
Hang on a second. That doesn't sound like resilience.
Right.
I mean, you can survive it, but as a father, I'm always saying to myself, what am I doing now that's going to put them in therapy later? And how do I not do that?
Yeah, and you're saying in some ways, you're building some character right now that maybe will prevent them from going to therapy later.
Yeah, I mean, I know for sure I'm making plenty of mistakes, but I'm really trying not to.
How old are they?
The oldest is 12. The youngest is 3.
Do they understand the magnitude of what you're trying to do?
The older 3 do. The youngest one, she got to see one XB1 flight, and and so I think she doesn't know the difference between an airplane and a rocket yet, really. I took her to a museum where we have a mock-up of the airplane. It's in a museum, and she's like, "It's Daddy's rocket," and it was adorable. But I don't, and then we would watch the SpaceX videos together, and this is when she was 2, and she'd be like, "Daddy, red car video," and I'm like, "Red car video. Do you want to watch a YouTube video of a car race?
Tesla in space?"
We'll get there. But I pull up some Formula One thing. She says, "No, Daddy, red car rocket. Oh, she's locked onto the Falcon Heavy original test flight." And it was her favorite thing for a while was to watch
where
Elon
strapped
put his roadster hurled at Mars. So I don't know how much she understands or doesn't understand. But my oldest, when she turned 10, it was one of those sort of like darker moments for the Boom, because it was very not clear that we would succeed. I was very worried we'd run out of money without ever having flown anything, and that would be bad in a zillion ways. And yet for her, like basically Dad has been working on this her entire life that she can remember, because I started when she was like a year old. And we went out, I took her out to ice cream, and we're like driving home, and she's in the back of the car, and I'm feeling very pensive. And I said, Ada, like, how would you feel if this thing I've been doing your entire life didn't work and it never flew? And she didn't miss a beat. She said, Dad, I'd be proud of you for trying. And that means a lot to me.
Wow.
And, and yet it's also kind of the thing I tell myself. Like, I still get afraid of failure, but again, it's my wish for every founder. Do something that you'd be proud to fail at.
When you feel this sense of inevitability, but also this deep fear of failure, how do you square those two things at once? Like, you obviously have to project this incredible exuberance and confidence on the outside, yet I still know that you feel this palpable feeling that things could all come crashing down.
Yeah.
And isn't that kind of the curse of an entrepreneur?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, maybe my supposed to pretend it's not that way. Maybe if I did, it'd be way easier to raise money. But it's not in my character to be that way. So I definitely believe it's possible.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I sort of, my mental model for myself is, I don't know if you've ever seen those like how it's made videos for pasta, where there's like this like machine that's got the pasta dough in this big metal container, and it's got like a little hole that's like noodle shaped, and there's like a big crank like massively pushing this pasta dough through the extruded hole to create the noodle. And it's like, it requires an enormous amount of force to like turn the mound of dough into like, the right shaped noodle. And I sort of imagine myself as I'm that dough, and I like have to come out the right shape to be the leader of this thing. And like all the worst things are about like when I'm like questioning my own leadership and like, am I doing this right? Am I screwing it up? But I try to. I've had the fortune of had some great executive coaches. I think that's really important. And and I try to like have some personal development goals. And like know like what is the most important thing for me to upgrade in myself at any given moment, and like really work on that.
Are you going to be on the first commercial flight?
Definitely. The question is whether I'm on the first test flight, and it's not answered yet, but I would like the answer to be yes.
What do you mean?
Meaning like when it's not a certified airplane, it's flying for the very first time. Am I on the airplane?
But like you wouldn't have been the test pilot for the one that you just did in the Mojave, right?
But by the way, when it's an airliner, like there's room for more than just the test pilot, right?
You would like to be?
I would love to be.
Can't you just say I'm going to be on it?
It's a complicated question, right?
Meaning there's some key man risks in your...
There is, but there's also like one of my most important jobs is to build the right safety culture, and I don't build a good safety culture by pretending the rules don't apply to me. And so, for example, during all of its design, development, build, flight test phase, I never got an XB1. I never sat in the airplane. And because I didn't want to be the CEO that got in the airplane and broke something.
Sat in it even if it's like just still grounded?
Like I never got in the cockpit. So like after the 13th flight, which is the final flight, like the stairs are there and I'm like, I'm going to go get in the airplane. And I got in the airplane. I was probably like that, like the toddler at the museum, like flipping all the switches, because I'm like, okay, there's no safety criticality here anymore. But I didn't let myself do it until, until it would be appropriate for anybody in the team to be there just for the enjoyment of it. And we could talk a lot about safety culture and building that, but I think I need to lead by example. And like I shouldn't be on the airplane on a test flight unless I have a reason to be there.
So,
I want to is not a good enough reason.
I was going to say, you're going to come up with a reason?
Well, I would like to invent a reason like I know enough to be a good flight test engineer, or I'm skilled enough as a pilot to be up in the front. Like if I can invent a good enough reason and it really passes muster, then I would love to do it.
Dude,
but it's like that would be like the side hustle.
If you have a Starlink on there, you 100% need to go live from the test. That's a good enough reason.
Well, somebody else could do that, but yes.
No, it has to be you. Wait, you know somebody else?
All right, you're justifying this.
You have to. Can I be on the first commercial flight?
Well, there are only 64 seats on it, and a lot of people want to be in the first one. So it's going to be that will really be up to the first airline. Those won't be our seats to allocate.
Who do you think is going to do it? United?
I mean, United was first to order, and they certainly could be first to have a commercial flight.
I have a feeling my 1K status isn't going to bump me up to the top 64.
It'll be a pretty special flight, but I think we'll be able to engineer it such that there are a number of first flights. You know, like each overture flight on a new route will be a record-setting flight. Mm-hmm. So there actually will be a lot of opportunities to be on record-setting flights.
That's awesome. Well, I'd like to do one of them.
You should absolutely do one of them.
I'm in. Thank you for doing this. Are you hiring?
Yes, but slowly. There's a whole other story there. I think I've come to believe is so it's actually really easy to get ego invested in the wrong things, like how big is the team, and I've tried to become ego invested in how small is the team, and so like we did XP1 with 50 people, and so we're yeah, and I think we can do our engine with maybe 25. And I don't know how small the production airplane team can be, but I think it can be pretty small.
How big is the company right now?
135 or so.
How much have you raised?
600.
Wow.
And knowing what we know now, we could have done what we've done for probably 200, not 600.
Like you have money sitting in the bank?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we also we made a bunch of mistakes along the way that cost money. And one of them was letting the company get too bigger than it needed to be. And so we learned how to be efficient.
Do you think you let the company get bigger than it needs to be because you had some ego around size of company?
Well, a little bit.
But you wanted to say that you run a company that has hundreds of people?
It wasn't quite that bad. But we were fighting to have people believe in us. And in the aerospace industry, all the legacy players think you need astronomical teams. And if you go in and you say, well, I've got 50 people, they're like, oh, you can't do anything. Yeah. It's bullshit. But like that's the belief. And so we were trying to get to the point where we wanted to get suppliers on board, wanted to get airlines on board. It helped have a larger team. And I think that caused me to lose some discipline. And, so I could go back, I would like invert that. And I would proudly tell the story about small and mighty teams versus, letting it get bigger. And then like we almost like SPAC'd. And so like we built up a bunch of G&A. To be a publicly traded company, and like, so glad that never happened. That would have been a massive mistake.
Thank God.
Yeah. But then we had like, we had like a world-class accounting team, but like, we don't need a world-class accounting team.
Right. So what are you hiring for?
Anybody who's extraordinary, we will hire. So we have a very high talent bar, but whether you're an engineer, or like a product designer or like a really great marketer, like almost any role in the company, we will hire you now, so long as you are truly extraordinary.
As long as the marketer signs off on you going on the test flight with your phone, Mm-hmm. And do you live here and the company's in Denver?
No, the company's in Denver and I'm in Denver.
Okay. So everybody's in Denver.
The vast majority, like during COVID, we had created some remote. We're not really doing much remote anymore. And then we're building a factory in North Carolina. So some will be in person in North Carolina, but the core of the team's in Denver.
When are you going to do the interior announcement?
I don't know yet. I mean, we could do it tomorrow, but I don't think I think we're going to keep it in our back pocket a little bit longer. Let it cook.
Can I come and do it with you? Like, can I go out there and talk about it with you?
I mean, sure. But I don't know if it's like 2 years from now or 2 months from now.
I don't care.
Yeah, sure. Come out, try it out.
I don't care.
Yeah.
All right. We'll sit in the seats.
We can sit in the seats
and record.
That would be fun.
That would be fun. When you hear the word grit, what do you think of?
I think of the shrimp and grits I had for lunch yesterday. I don't know. Like I think of persistence. I think of not giving up, and I think of what enables that. And it's like the strong belief in mission that enables me to have grit.
Blake, the hairs have been standing up on my arm for almost 2 hours, and John Doerr has a expression around entrepreneurs, and he described Bezos this way, which is that he looks for the ones that have a convincing ability to bend the future towards their will. And for 2 hours, you have thoroughly convinced me that you are going to bend the future to your will. And I just really appreciate you doing this and being so honest and going for it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It feels like the honor of a lifetime.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.